Good afternoon to you. 406 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, we'll be joined this hour by U.S. Senator Eric Schmitt. We'll get the latest update on the fight for free speech. The Biden administration now trying to censor the 2024 election. The court's saying you're not allowed to do that. Eric Schmitt will join us on that subject. Dr. Kevin Roberts is here at 5:30 from the Heritage Foundation. We'll talk about the speaker's race and what would be best for America. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Well, doggone it. Another one is out at the White House. Another German Shepherd is now being sent off to the farm or somewhere. We have no idea where these dogs keep going after dozens of White House employees have been bitten by first Major and now subsequently Commander. They're not just Secret Service agents, household staff, all sorts of people keep getting bitten to the point that the medical staff has had to attend to the various wounds that all of these government employees have endured. The Bidens clearly incapable of raising dogs, but it unfortunately gets so much worse than that. Tom Fitton joins us now. He's a president of Judicial Watch and the author of A Republic Under Assault. Tom, good to have you with us.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks for having me, Vince.
Tom, I have noticed that the media has been begrudgingly referencing your organization, Judicial Watch, over and over and over these past few days because it turns out you're like the only place that's done the reporting on this subject.
Yeah, I mean, we first exposed how Major was biting many more people than the Biden White House admitted to. We exposed that, and Major ended up going to the farm more or less. And then they got Commander. We got a tip that Commander was out of control. They stalled and stonewalled our request for information. I think we had to sue. And turned out he had bitten at least 10 FBI agents or Secret Service agents, attacked them. And that was back in July. Now, 5 months later, CNN reports he attacked another agent. And there were other people who were attacked as well over the summer. So during the summer, they're saying, oh, no. By the way, we don't care that 10 agents have been attacked. We're only doing something because Judicial Watch reported on it and publicized it. But in fact, they didn't do anything because the dog kept on attacking people throughout the summer, including as recently as a week ago. And now he's out of the White House. I don't know if he's in his home or not up in Delaware. That's no safer for the agents and service and the White House service staff that staff the home up there.
Yeah.
Because one of the incidents, Commander slid out the door and bit a Secret Service tech on the back.
I mean, the president himself sustained a foot injury. I think we're getting some injury. I don't know why, but we're getting some feedback from Tom's phone. But I was just saying to Tom, they are the president himself at one point had broken his foot. It was associated. He claimed it was while he was with the dog. I don't even know what happened, but it's possible here that there was an incident that injured him. I mean, we know that for a fact, that injured him that involved one of these dogs. Things are pretty out of control, Tom.
Yeah, and we have a source that has told us that the president has mistreated his dogs and, hits them and kicks them and swats them. And so I don't know what training they're getting, if any, but certainly this isn't about a family dog in the sense that, there was a bite. These are Secret Service agents, White House staff, federal workers, law enforcement who are trying to protect the president, who were bitten,
yes,
and no one did anything about it.
Well,
in fact, they tried to cover it up.
Yeah.
Biden himself suggested the Secret Service was exaggerating and lying. Just recently, CNN was suggesting that, the Secret Service agents have negative looks on their faces or something like that, as if they deserve to be attacked by the dog. Incredible.
Well, one of the, I think in the CNN reporting, one of the claims was that these Secret Service agents walk around and they're big and scary looking and they carry guns. That was the quote, that they carry guns. So therefore, maybe that's why the dogs are biting them. That's like fully insane. Why would a dog identify a gun and be like, I should bite that guy?
No, and at one point, Jill was holding the dog. The president was involved, I think, in one of the incidents where he was present. And so this isn't like plausible deniability either, that they're out of country or out of the White House and the dog is, someone loses control on staff. They've seen it happen in person. And they're still covering it up. I mean, we just had to sue the Secret Service agency for additional records because they haven't given us anything since July, even though we know there have been other attacks. So what's going to be?
What would normally happen? I mean, Tom, what would normally happen in your life if you had a neighbor who had a dog that was biting like some of the neighbor kids or something? What normally happens in that circumstance?
Well, if you were a district resident who didn't live at Pennsylvania Avenue, your dog would have been taken by the government. It would have been the mayor's office or the D.C. government would have had to figure out whether it was a dangerous dog, and the dog would have been subject to being removed. And obviously, 11 bites. Well, as you note, there are other attacks that we don't have the details on. So 24, who knows how many. And, reading the CNN report, Vince, I don't know if you noticed that, but there were parts of the White House Secret Service wasn't going into and wasn't covering, it looked like to me, because of the dog. So this is a safety issue for the president and other White House staff that the Secret Service has to have full access to the White House in order to protect the complex. And the dog stopped that from happening. And I tell you, a dog can kill someone pretty easily, especially a German Shepherd. And it's by the grace of God no one's been killed.
It's amazing that this is even happening. Also, it says something that it's not just one dog this occurred with. It seems like every dog the Bidens take into their custody turns out to be a menace. It says something about their ownership, doesn't it? Is Tom?
But that would be interesting in terms of a discussion if you weren't president. I mean, these it wasn't like it's getting to his neighbor got nicked. I mean, these are agents who are worried about having to shoot the dog. It's so bad.
Yeah. So you had a source you just told us a moment ago, and I just want to dwell on this moment for a moment, that said that Biden has been abusive towards at least one, if not both, of these animals, that he hits them and kicks them?
All three of them. Remember, Champ was this dog as vice president, and Champ passed away. They got Major. Major started biting. He was moved out, and they got Commander, and Commander was biting. And our source says he beat all three of them.
Well, it would follow that if you're striking a dog, that they're going to act aggressively in reaction to that.
Well, in any training the dog is, I would presume there was some type of training that was taking place. But if the owner's idea of training is to, hit the dog if the dog misbehaves, or, I don't know what Joe was doing, obviously it's not going to work. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? You've got people being sent to the hospital, Secret Service agents in fear for their lives from this dog.
Yes.
I mean, anyone, your listeners, we all love dogs, right? And we all hear terrible stories or been too close to situations where dogs have bitten someone, or had family members having to deal with this, or maybe you've had to deal with it directly. And the idea that any dog owner would allow their dog to bite 11 people at least, and them not taking steps to remove the dog from the premises. Both the dog needed to be removed both from the Biden family, as long as they were protected by the Secret Service.
Right. Yeah. No. If that happened in my life, it would shatter everything. We'd lock down. We'd figure out what we do. It'd be a big deal. It'd be a really big deal if my dog bit somebody and hurt them and hospitalized them. That'd be a huge deal. But it seems like the Bidens just let it wash over them.
What's their response? Attack the Secret Service.
Yeah, that's what they've done. I'm looking at a photo that came out this week. Not a Secret Service agent, just a White House staffer by the name of Dale Haney. He's 71 years old. Looks like he's standing outdoors. I'm not sure what his job is, but there is a picture of Commander essentially hanging off of his arm. He's got his teeth clenched around the 71-year-old man's wrist, and he's hanging down. And this is, it seems like it took a photo like this getting out for the White House to finally admit they had a problem.
Yeah, and then folks worrying about workplace safety. I mean, this is sort of basic worker protect your workers 101. And I keep on going back. This is the Secret Service. I mean, when they're protecting the first family, they shouldn't have to worry about a deadly weapon, ready to attack them from the back at any moment.
Yes.
If the dog is around, you want them focused on protecting the family and not worrying about this dog attacking them.
Exactly right.
And that places them at risk. It places the Bidens at risk and everyone in the White House at risk.
Yeah. And the
I'm sorry this dog had to leave, but there was no choice.
Yes.
And it should have been done in the beginning of the year, by the way. They've known about this since as soon as the dog got there, he got out of control.
And just like every other one of these Biden scandals, it involves him being abusive in some way and covering it up in the aftermath. Tom Fitton, Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your dogged reporting on this subject. No pun intended, truly. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Let me check in on the phones here. We've got Al calling in from Bowie now, line 2. Al, you're a dog trainer, Al.
Hi, yeah, Vince. I've talked to you a bunch of times, man, and it's always been great. Commander's looking for someone to be the pack leader. That's all it is. It's a combination of nobody is his alpha. So he's saying, who's the alpha? I think I'm the alpha. And then he's got these testosterone-laden, well, I don't know in Biden's administration how much testosterone is going around in the Secret Service protection, but I assume it's pretty high. So those guys are all walking around on full alert all the time. The dog's going, man, everybody's on full alert. I'm on full alert, and there's no pack leader. I think I'm the pack leader. And so, yeah, it is a failure of Joe Biden, but it's also a failure of the Secret Service because let me backtrack for 1 second. I know you've got time limitations, but that video or that image of the man being dragged by his forearm, that's an indication of somebody kind of teasing the dog. German Shepherd, any dog is going to sneak up behind you and bite you on your ass, or God forbid, come up in front of you and bite you at a similar part of your body. Mm-hmm. They don't grab your arm unless someone's teaching them, hey, get his arm. So there's a lot of bad stuff going right there. But if somebody would just tell Joe Biden he's not the guy that should own a dog, that would go a long way.
Yeah, so the problem here is President Beta. He's not alpha enough to be a dog owner.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and nobody else around him is. And I feel terrible for the dog because he'll do anything you tell him.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's a lesson in here. If you can't manage a dog, you can't be the president of the United States. That's just basic stuff. You've got to be a good dog owner.
Amen to that, my friend.
Al, thank you very much for that. Let me see here. Kirk, Washington, D.C., line 4. Kirk, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Listen, the way a dog responds is indicative of how he's raised, how he's treated at home. Biden has abused his children, abuses his dog, abuses the people in the country. He's an abusive individual, despite his plausible deniability. And nobody assumes any responsibility for the abuse either. That poor dog is being abused and being mistreated. And like your former caller said, the dog is confused. He's looking for a pack leader. He's assuming he has to be the pack leader. And there's no sense of discipline. It's astounding. I have a dog that is very responsive to me. No threatening, no violence, no verbal voice raising or anything along those lines. So dogs are typically loyal and obedient and responsive to, the quote master, if you will.
Yeah. It's like children. They just need productive, healthy relationships to be raised right, and that's not what they have with Joe Biden.
Exactly.
Kirk,
it's indicative of the way Joe Biden works.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly right. I mean, the guy, he's abusive at all levels. He showered with his daughter. The guy's he's out of control.
Coward.
Kirk, thank you.
Boisterous coward.
Yeah, the Bidens really must be convinced. They think they can get away with anything. I mean, that has been their experience, hasn't it? Their animals can bite dozens of government officials, government workers. I want government officials. They're not even in charge of things. They're just Secret Service agents trying to protect the president and the family. You have staffers, the crew at the White House that's responsible for keeping things running there, getting bitten by the dogs and bloodied up, hospitalization required in some cases. Biden is beating the dogs, according to Tom Fitton. Tom Fitton says he's got his sources telling him that Biden has been punching and kicking at these dogs. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Ed is in Washington, D.C., line 9. Ed, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. I'm on a headset. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly. It's a good headset. Go ahead, Ed.
Excellent. I actually live in Fairfax County, and we had a situation in our neighborhood where they took a dog away because it bit somebody. My wife looked into it. Fairfax County has a one-bite rule. If a dog bites, they take it and they destroy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as Dave Portnoy says, one bite. Everybody knows the rules. If that happens, you get rid of the dog in Fairfax County. So that's not what happened at the White House, Ed. Fairfax County is far more hawkish on this issue.
Yeah, in one sense, I don't think it's good. I think there should be some kind of judge's decision, like there should be some kind of appeal.
Sure.
Like Prince George has had that thing about pit bulls a while back.
Yeah.
I think that didn't work out.
Right. We don't have to Old Yeller every dog all the time, but I agree. But still, it's a little excessive when 24 people are bitten by the dogs at the White House and nobody does anything about it because Biden gets to do whatever he wants.
Absolutely.
All right, Ed, thank you.
All right, Vince.
Excellent point and great headset. Let me see here. I've got, let's see. I've got Sherry in North Carolina, line 8. Sherry, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vince. Thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
Can you hear? You can hear me okay? Okay.
Great.
I was surprised when they got the second dog because it was obvious that they failed with the first dog. Not nearly surprised that this happened because their children are out of control. You expect them to be able to manage their dogs?
Exactly right. Yeah. It's interesting. The only Biden family members who faced consequences of any kind are the dogs. That's it. Exactly. And it came very, very slowly. Sherry, thank you. I appreciate the call. Hey, coming up, the Biden administration is trying to censor the 2024 election. A court just told them to knock it off. One of the people responsible for fighting on our behalf on the side of free speech, U.S. Senator Eric Schmitt, will be with us coming up next. Good afternoon to you. It is 4:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts will be with us at 5:30. We will chat with him about the speaker's race. What are we looking for in the next Speaker of the House? We'll chat with him, and we'll chat with you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. While Republicans work to figure out who the next speaker is going to be, the Biden administration is trying to censor American citizens ahead of the 2024 presidential election. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit this week ruled that a key cybersecurity defense agency probably violated the First Amendment in its efforts to coordinate with Silicon Valley to, quote, protect elections from online hoaxes. The Washington Post reporting this week, it's a decision that could have sweeping implications for government efforts to secure the vote in 2024. Barf. The Washington Post write-up of this is awful. The reality here is that the Biden administration is being put in check by the Fifth Circuit from censoring American citizens during the election. For more on this, we bring in Eric Schmitt now. He's the former attorney general in Missouri and is responsible for bringing this lawsuit. He's now a U.S. senator from the state of Missouri. Sir, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Vince.
This seems like a big victory this week in an ongoing court saga.
It is. I mean, I think that in some ways, in conservative circles, it's gotten some attention. The mainstream media, of course, has completely ignored this. But the truth of the matter is this is the most important free speech case in the history of the country because it deals with, I mean, this isn't just big tech by itself. This is the case has been made and has been found at the district court level and not the circuit court level that big government, the federal government with all of its power and authority, colluded with, corroborated with, and coerced big tech, some of the biggest companies in the history of the world, to censor Americans. Millions of posts, whether it was the lab leak theory, whether it was masking, whether it was on the vaccine, whether it was on the Hunter Biden laptop story, you name it, they were involved in censoring speech. And of course, the government doesn't get to do that, but they also don't get to outsource that to third parties like big tech. And so it's a big case, and it's ongoing, that's for sure. Ultimately, it'll end up at the Supreme Court, I'm sure, Vince.
I did see that the Biden administration, in its court filings, they said something like, well, when the FBI asks for Americans to be censored, we're only successful 50% of the time. Which is like, wait a second. That's insane. Like, imagine if you had the power as an individual to just shut down 50% of all speech that you saw, like all over the place. That's crazy.
It's nuts. And you know, whenever you see them protecting us from disinformation and misinformation, that basically means conservative speech, right? That they don't like. And by the way, the remedy for that is more information, right? If you disagree with a point of view or you think it's factually incorrect, you say, listen, here's why. You don't take it down. The government doesn't get to do that. You know, I'm 48 years old, so I'm sort of, I guess, Gen X. You know, growing up, liberals at least believed in free speech. That is no longer the case, Vince. It's actually shocking the lengths that they'll go for this kind of power and control. And so now they're using the government along with big tech to censor. We had the chance to take not only Anthony Fauci's deposition when I was Attorney General, but also Elvis Chan, who was the FBI agent in the Northern District of California with the big tech companies, who told them on the eve of the election, they were having weekly censorship meetings, was telling them, even though the FBI had the laptop from November of 2019, told them, look out for this Russian hack and leak operation. And in a sworn affidavit, Yoel Roth, who was the Twitter guy, said he specifically mentioned Hunter Biden. So they were setting the stage even in 2020. Of course, they get into office. Any disagreement with the regime's narrative on masks or vaccines they censored, it's widespread. And even the judge notes this is Orwellian. And then what did they do, Vince? They have a disinformation governance board. I mean, this is nuts. It's out of a novel.
So the tech companies, obviously they're ideologically in line with the government here. So that plays a role in this. But additionally, is it your impression, it certainly is mine, reading through some of the court filings and some of the testimony, that the tech companies were nervous about ever rejecting the government's requests for censorship?
That's right. And one of the linchpins here is that in order, I mean, you know, these big tech companies willingly, you look at their donations from the employees inside, or when people lost their minds when Elon Musk bought Twitter, clearly that's their bent. However, the hook here in this case, and what's very important, is that the government threatened. They threatened legal action. They threatened antitrust investigations. They threatened these companies would lose their Section 230 protections if they didn't censor more. So that's a big part of the case. So although they may do some of this willingly, we have text messages and emails going back and forth saying, hey, this is a problem, take it down, and a response saying, you know, we did it, what else can we do? And you know, intermixed with all of that are threats coming from the podium at the press secretary, threats coming from people inside of the White House saying, do this or else. I think one of the judge's notes in the Fifth Circuit opinion was, that's a nice big tech company you have there. Isn't it? Wouldn't it be a shame if something happened to it, right? That's essentially what they were doing. And you don't get to do that. And so anyway.
So it's interesting that they would even rely on Section 230. This is the Communications Decency Act, correct? Which has a very Orwellian name for what it's worth, communications decency. But regardless, so that you have a protection from lawsuits if you are merely a platform and not a publisher of information. You're not making editorial judgments about what appears on your platform. You're just allowing people to communicate. So obviously that kind of thing, immunity from lawsuits, is a good way to protect an environment where free speech is proliferating. But what the government appears to be doing here is forcing these companies to make editorial judgments. You will censor certain lines of communication. You will elevate others. And so how could they lose their Section 230 protections? They're forcing them to do this.
Right. Well, they were saying you're going to lose your special legal protections if you don't do what we want you to do, which is to censor speech. You know, I've got legislation now in the Senate. Obviously, when I was Attorney General, this is a seminal case that does a couple of things. On the public side, if the government is found to be violating your First Amendment rights, we've got legislation that would allow individuals to sue individual government actors for those First Amendment violations. Instead of just one attorney general bringing these causes of action to stop this nonsense, we need an army of citizens being able to sue some bureaucrat. And that will be, by the way, a disincentive for the government to continue to do this. On the private side, the reason why they should lose their Section 230 protections isn't because they're censoring. It should be if they're censoring, not because they're not censoring, right? So if it's found that a big tech company is violating your First Amendment rights, that's why they ought to lose their Section 230 protections. But the government was using a different way to get them to censor, which is, if you think about that, again, you just keep coming back to this sort of Orwellian, dystopian world that I'm not sure people thought we would be in a few years ago, but that's where we're at, and we got to stop it.
Well, these companies, they in many ways control the public square now. 90% of all search is done through Google, and so that affects the way that the average citizen views the world and how to consider what to vote for and who should be in power. And that's what we do as American citizens. If they're engaged in viewpoint discrimination with that monopoly power, then they're not a platform. They're a publisher.
That's exactly right. So you know what? You don't get the protection if you're making those kinds of editorial decisions. Because if you think about it, when that law came into effect in 1996, the idea was that the internet would sort of democratize information, right? You'd have more information. People could have their points of view. It would be in the virtual town square. What has happened now is, if that's not the case, and they're making editorial decisions, they're saying you can say this and you can't say this. It no longer fits in the construct that it was intended, right, to give this sort of broad immunity. So you got to pick, right? You're either going to be an open platform where you allow free speech, or you're going to be a publisher and you don't have the Section 230 protections. I think that's the right way to look at this. But no matter how you look at it in the private sphere, one thing is clear: the government has no business telling you what you can say, what you can hear, what you can think. It's really one of the founding principles of the country, right? It's this pressure release valve for us to be able to speak our minds, not just in the town square, but also in the virtual town square as well.
So as this case works its way up to the United States Supreme Court, it does seem pretty important in terms of establishing what the lines are, because the government has clearly been using private industry to do what it can't do directly.
Right, and if you look at the drumbeat of some of the global elites, say at the World Economic Forum or at the United Nations, you hear this sort of undertone of we have to make sure we're controlling misinformation and disinformation. Listen, I'm all for the truth. The difference is individuals get to decide what that is, right? The government doesn't get to decide what that is. So we've got to be pretty vigilant here. This case is a big part of it, but this is going to continue as everybody's online more, as AI plays a more significant role in synthesizing information. We've got to keep an eye out because you've got government agencies who think they know better than everyone else, and we've got to make sure we disrupt that. The lawsuit's a piece of it. Litigation's a piece of it. And again, like I said, having individual citizens being able to bring these causes of actions against bureaucrats, I think would be a nice disincentive as well.
For sure. There was supposed to be a hearing today in the House Judiciary Committee that involved a man you just mentioned a few minutes ago, FBI agent Elvis Chan. Elvis Chan is the agent, for people who may not remember, who was behind so much of this tech censorship, allegedly. He was the one who was pressuring places like Twitter and Facebook to not publish the Hunter Biden story, in fact, to censor it. He was supposed to testify today before House Judiciary, but did not. In fact, when he showed up with a Biden administration handler who was supposed to oversee his testimony. The committee said that person is not allowed in the room. And, Elvis has left the building. Elvis Chan did not go to that hearing today. What do you make of that the Biden administration wanted to lord over his testimony?
I think that what you're probably seeing is just like when Merrick Garland testified in front of that committee just a couple of weeks ago. If you notice, his testimony was very reserved about, sort of what he knew about targeting political enemies, going after, Catholics, going after pro-lifers, going after parents. I think, given the subpoena power that the House has, given the impeachment inquiry, there's a lot of information they can get here. So I think they're worried about a perjury, issue right now. That's what it tells me. But we have his deposition. One of the reasons why that deposition was so important when we took it in the Moby Biden case, it's a baseline, right? And so information that comes out afterwards now can be challenged or can challenge his whatever new testimony he might have or whatever denials he had at the time. This is also true, by the way, with Anthony Fauci. In my view, it's just a matter of time, but he ought to be brought. before that committee and other committees. And certainly if Republicans had the gavels in the Senate, this would already have happened, I believe. But I think this is an important thing to watch because the havoc that was wreaked by Anthony Fauci in covering his tracks on the funding of the Wuhan lab, and then trying to smear anyone who talked about that theory or his involvement. That's part of this case too. So it's the sort of wall of lies that they built over a period of months and years is going to come crashing down. And I'm glad Jim Jordan and others are pursuing this aggressively.
Senator Eric Schmitt, finally, we are now just less than 3 months away from 2024 and truly to be in the heat of the presidential election. Will we be able to ensure that free speech can prevail going into and through this next campaign?
I hope so. We understand what's at stake here. We saw what happened in 2020. The laptop story is the most glaring example of this, right? They did not want that story to come out. The FBI helped poison the well before. You had Anthony Blinken round up all these intelligence agency hacks, sign a letter saying that's nonsense. They did everything they could to keep that away from the American people, and we're pretty successful at it. I think there's lessons learned there. One thing that I think we should all take away from is we have to fight back. We can never back down from this. The First Amendment is worth fighting for. Our elections are worth fighting for. So I'm going to remain vigilant. I know a lot of people are too. It's just really important. And I think that this election, 2024, really determines sort of the trajectory of our republic. And we're not talking about, Vince, like marginal tax rates. We're talking about Democrats want to add states to the union, obliterating people's First Amendment rights, federalizing elections, and adding, justices to the Supreme Court. So there's a lot on the line.
Yeah, and if you can control what people see, you can control their minds, and that's how you rig an election, truly. Senator, good to have you with us today. Senator Eric Schmitt from Missouri. Thank you, sir.
Anytime, Vince. Take care.
All right. Yeah, the left is relentless, whether it comes to censoring free speech, censoring speech around the elections, or trying to imprison the leading presidential candidate who happens to be an opponent to the party in power. There's a clip that amused me, so I'm going to share it with you. Joe Rogan, the comedian and podcaster, he was talking about how the left is trying to imprison and hurt and destroy Donald Trump because they say he overvalued Mar-a-Lago, his beautiful palatial estate in Florida, waterfront. Can you imagine being able to afford Mar-a-Lago? The judge in the case says, it's only worth $18 million, and that had this comedian laughing his butt off.
He said it was worth between $300 and $700 million, and they were saying that it's worth $18 million. It's like they don't even try to pretend.
Yeah.
Like
why does no one trust the mainstream?
If the guy says his house is worth $1 billion, right?
Yeah.
And then you come along and say, no, it's worth like $800 million. Forbes says it's worth as much as $700 million. We'll call it $700 million. Now you got a reasonable argument.
Yeah.
But if you say $18 million, like, you got to know that's like a palace. The place is a palace. It's 20 acres. Get the fuck out of here. This is great. You can't do that. That's like too obvious. You don't give a fuck about the truth.
Yeah, it's too obvious, he says. You don't give a bleep about the truth. It's the same thing with all of these other, the timing on these cases is the most obvious thing. If your lefty friends are like, well, Trump did this and that, the only reason he's being charged with all these things is because he's a bad man. Have you contemplated the timing of any of this? Does it strike you as weird that all of these supposed crimes occurred years ago and they're all being charged right now in late 2023? Have you thought for a moment about the timing of all of this? And all of the people who are pursuing these charges are hair on fire left-wing radicals? Letitia James ran on the destruction of one man, Donald Trump. I'm running to destroy Trump. That's insane. So here she is fulfilling her campaign promise. And you have lefties who buy this? It's crazy. It's totally crazy. All right, let's check in on the phones. Donna's calling in. Donna Frederick, line 1. Hello, Donna. Good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. It's all their new terminology. Misinformation and disinformation. I can't stand it. It's just information, and you decide if it's fact or fiction.
I know. You know what another version of that is, Donna? is when people use the phrase reverse racism. You ever heard that? Reverse racism?
Yeah.
And it's like,
just
what
racism.
What does that even mean? Reverse racism is not racism. I don't actually even know what you're talking about. No, it's just racism. If you're racially prejudiced against someone on account of an immutable characteristic, you're being racist. It's very simple.
It's insane. I'm sick of their word games, this Solinsky tactic they're all doing, and it's, we need to really go back to normalcy, if we could even remember what that is anymore.
I know.
But you mentioned earlier about the speaker, what we'd like to see.
Yes.
I want to see somebody who go in there and who will act on behalf of the American people and not use devices to work against our best interests.
Yes.
And we've seen that happen. We're sick of paying for everybody else and everybody else's problems. We need to take care of our own and have a pro-America agenda.
Somebody who gets angry when they see that the American people are being harmed. Somebody who actually stands up for the people that they were sent to Washington to serve. Somebody who's willing to summon the rage that we saw directed at Nancy Pelosi for not standing up for Kevin McCarthy. Now they kicked her out of her office. I'd like more aggression on our behalf, not just on defending Kevin McCarthy's honor and broken promises between Washingtonians, fighters on behalf of decency in our country.
No more uniparty.
No more. Donna, thank you. We're going to talk to Kevin Roberts here in the next hour on that very subject. A couple of interesting people have taken off their hats and thrown them into the ring. Are they all deserving? Is one of them a standout? Kevin Roberts will join us, and a lot more ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.